Animating colossal creatures for film and video games requires a certain balance that sometimes even professionals and movie productions struggle with. Over the years, we have seen a lot of examples of towering monsters such as Godzilla, Transformers, or massive boss from Shadow of the Colossus. When you see them, you should feel their immense weight and size. So in today's video, we're gonna take a look at how these giants are animated in a way that makes them look believable. Character animation takes time, we can all agree on that, especially when you are trying to make it feel natural. Keyframes give you control, sure, but eventually you hit that point in the project when you realize this might take forever. But what if it didn't? For the last 10 years, Okoko worked on taking a bit of that weight off, actually a lot of that. They built a full mocap setup that works for solo creators and small teams, without a big studio budget or 10 camera setup that is needed for accurate mocap. A setup that includes a smart suit, smart gloves and headcam, or even just your phone, making full body capture possible and precise for small teams and soloers. It all runs through Okoko Studio, where you can preview, record, clean up, and stream straight into Blender, Unreal, and Unity, whatever you're working on. And if you don't have the gear yet, there is also Okoko Vision. It lets you test ideas by capturing motion from video. I think the full suit is an investment in of itself, but it is a fraction of the traditional systems used by big studios. So if you're interested, the links will be in the description down below to check it out and see it for yourself. Let's start with the challenges of scale and weight. Giant creatures cannot be animated like human-sized characters. Physics tells us that as an animal's or object's size increases, its mass grows even faster, so movement must be adjusted accordingly. The first things animators do is of course to slow them down, to make them seem huge, explains ILM animation supervisor Hal Hickel, who was a lead in the Pacific Rim robot and monster animations. You see, a 250-foot creature simply can't dart around lightly. Fast motions would make it feel weightless or floaty. However, animators also face the slow motion paradox. If movements are too slow, the action can look boring or lacking energy. When it comes to the perception of weight, when animators animate giants, viewers intuitively judge weight by how an object accelerates, impacts other things, or responds to gravity. A giant's footstep, for example, should cause a tremor or leave a crater, and its limbs should show momentum, starting up slowly and lagging when stopping due to inertia. If a huge creature stops on a dime or moves with agility, it breaks believability. As for Fumito Ueda, the creator of Shadow of the Colossus, told his team, the bigger the Colossus, the slower it moves, because large size implies greater mass, which makes sense. But simply slowing the animation isn't enough. One also must enrich the motion with detail. He also added, even if the movement is slow, if you don't add more and more information, such as the reaction of the ground when it takes a step, or the way the reaction is transmitted to its knees and hips, people will only see it as something slow. In other words, a giant's motion should be packed with subtle secondary movements and environmental reactions to convey heft, not just played at slow speed. Another plausibility issue is the creature's anatomy and how it supports itself. Animators work closely with designers to ensure a giant monster's proportions can plausibly carry its weight. For instance, animating a 300-foot tall gorilla like King Kong or dinosaur such as Godzilla might involve slightly exaggerating limb thickness or reducing agility to respect what a skeleton of that size could do, even if the creature is fantastical. The goal is to keep it feeling grounded, especially in the laws of physics. This often means avoiding extremely fast, elastic motions that smaller creatures or humans can perform, and instead emphasizing power and momentum over agility. Beyond the animator's skill and how they perceive scale and weight, physics simulations play a huge role in making giant creature animation believable. Visual effects studios employ various simulation tools to handle the complex interactions that massive creatures have with their environment and their own bodies. Large VFX creatures often have digital muscle systems under the hood. For Pacific Rim, for example, ILM built the kaiju monsters with complete skeletal and muscular structures beneath their skin that behave naturally. As these creatures moved, muscles flexed and skin stretched or jiggled in physically accurate ways, conveying a sense of flesh and weight. Likewise, NPC's team on Godzilla layered simulated muscles and fat to get convincing body deformation from any distance. And check this out. They even accounted for varying skin thickness and how Godzilla's scaly hide would slide over muscle. These details ensure that even Godzilla, when he twists or slams into something, his body wraps and ripples appropriately, rather than looking like a stiff rubber suit. And simulations are often tuned to the creature's scale. ILM mentioned that to get realistic physics, for the 250-foot Jaegers in Pacific Rim, they would scale the speed and weight by 40 and apply these metrics to movements. In other words, they adjusted parameters like gravity or time so that the 3D world felt 40 times heavier and slower, matching the scale of the robots. This kind of scaling helps the simulated debris, water, and even the creature's own parts move as if under the correct physical forces for something so huge. It prevents, say, dust clouds from disappearing too quickly, or water splashes from looking too small. You see, giant monsters inevitably wreak havoc on their surroundings, and simulating this convincingly is something crucial. So studios use specialized destruction physics to show, for example, buildings crumbling, trees snapping, or the ground shaking underfoot. In Godzilla, NPC developed entire digital city blocks of San Francisco so that the monsters could truly interact with their environments. Every step Godzilla took was said to destroy multiple city blocks, triggering collapses and dust clouds. NPC's proprietary destruction software, called Kali, was used to fracture buildings, while fluid simulation engines like Flowline handled the billowing dust and smoke. The key was to have all these effects respond to the creature's animation. For example, a footstep impact might send a ripple through the ground, toppling nearby structures in sequence and kicking up dust around the foot. These interactive cues greatly sell the weight. The audience sees the environment bending to the creature's mass. As VFX supervisor Rasharon explains, we used a lot of interactive effects with the creature's movements, like dust, debris, and water. They gave a clear comparison to gravity. For example, when you see debris or water falling very slowly, you immediately realize that you are witnessing something very big. I think what he means by that is that seeing enormous dust clouds linger and heavy rubble fall in slow motion helps our brains register the enormous scale at play. And here is an important thing that can also help sell the giant's animation in action. If a giant emerges from an ocean or battles in the rain, fluid simulations are used to get realistic splashes and rain interactions. Godzilla, for instance, rising from the sea, drags huge volumes of water with him, and the same thing can be said about Jaegers in Pacific Rim. Simulated water must account for their size, and droplets might appear smaller by comparison. Also, waves move slower relative to their bulk. In a similar fashion, rain falling on a 300-foot creature might form giant rivulets on its skin or surface. These fine touches, while subtle, contribute to the subconscious realism of the scene. Even the most physically accurate animation can fall flat if not presented correctly. Animators use some techniques and tricks to amplify the sense of scale to make giant creature movements believable. For example, animators use techniques like low angles and scale reference. In many productions, they often shoot giants from a low camera angle, as if the camera is at the human's eye level, looking up. This classic technique makes the subject look larger, compared to the average day-to-day objects. For example, many Godzilla shots are from the street level or rooftop height, looking upward as Godzilla passes. Exactly the perspective a human onlooker would have. We always positioned cameras in places that viewers could relate to, in the street, on the rooftop, or through a window, which always give you something you can compare to, says Retron about Godzilla cinematography. Including familiar objects like buildings, vehicles, and people in frame provides a scale reference, which is really useful. For example, seeing Godzilla's hand dwarf a fighter jet, or Jaeger wade through skyscrapers, immediately conveys their titanic size. Also, placing foreground objects between the camera and the giant can enhance scale through depth cues. Seeing a monster partially obscured by a building or mountain not only creates a dynamic reveal, but also lets the eye judge that the creature is far larger than the object in front. This layering tricks our depth perception into feeling how far away and huge the creature must be. Another subtle but effective camera trick is to treat the camera as if it is really there in the scene, subject to the giant's impact. In found footage style monster movie, a footstep might jostle the camera. Even in polished VFX shots, animators often add a slight camera tremor when the giant hits the ground, as if the shockwave travels through the camera. Focus can also be used creatively. A very large creature might span such depth that its head and tail can't both be in focus when viewed up close, mimicking how real cameras and eyes focus. Reveals and scale building also is one of the smartest techniques to use. But what does that mean? Many giant monster films build up the reveal of the creature piece by piece, a technique both for suspense and scale, showing only a footprint, not a tail smash, and a partial glimpse of the body can make the eventual full reveal more impactful. When the audience's mind has to assemble the creature from parts, they tend to imagine it even larger, which helps sell the immense size and enormous animation of the giant. And there you have it, guys. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe to this channel to receive more videos like this. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.